The story of humanity is, in many ways, the story of money. It's a story of trust, of ingenuity, of how we have solved again and again the most fundamental problem of human civilization: how to transform invisible value into something tangible and exchangeable. It all began in a primitive marketplace. Two people, two different needs, no way to meet in the middle. From that moment of frustration came an idea that would change the world forever. This is the story of how money made the modern world, from barter to the first coins, from gold to paper, from paper to the digital. A journey through millennia of innovation, power, and trust. Listen. Imagine the human community in its infancy. No bank, no state, no money. What there was a daily necessity: to survive and prosper through exchange. A farmer with surplus grain looked at the artisan with extraordinary tools and wanted them. But the artisan didn't want grain. He already had enough. This was the core problem of primitive economics, the double coincidence of wants. For an exchange to happen, both parties needed to have exactly what the other desired. At the same moment, in the same place, the value was trapped, unusable. The frustration was invisible but real. But humans are ingenious. Over time, communities discovered that certain objects were universally desired: cowrie shells, salt, whale teeth, axe heads. These weren't money in our modern sense. They were common measures of value. A farmer could accept shells knowing he could use them to get what he needed later. Value could flow across time. The community had invented something extraordinary: trust in abstract value. And with that trust, commerce began to flourish beyond single communities. Merchants could travel knowing their shells or salt would be accepted in distant lands. Civilization hadn't yet been born, but its foundations were already taking shape. Around 600 before Christ, in what is now Turkey, something extraordinary happened. The people of Lydia understood that they could completely standardize value. They didn't need shells from the sea. They could use metals from their mountains: gold, silver, bronze, rare, durable, easily recognizable, universally desired. A master metalsmith took a piece of metal, shaped it into a disc, and stamped it with a symbol: the lion of the sovereign, the seal of power. The guarantee that this metal was exactly what it claimed to be. For the first time in human history, value didn't depend on negotiation between two people. It depended on the authority of the state. That coin with its roaring lion said, "Trust me, I am the king. I guarantee the value of this metal." And the world listened. The Athenians copied it. The Persians adopted it. The Romans perfected it. Along the trade routes connecting Europe to the Middle East and Asia, minted money became the universal language. A Greek merchant could buy spices in Persia using silver coins because everyone understood the universal value of the metal and the power that guaranteed it. Coins were not merely money. They were civilization's technology. They allowed kingdoms to collect taxes. They allowed merchants to trade across vast distances. They allowed trust to transcend village boundaries and reach entire empires. But with this order came a new kind of power. Inside the mountain, in the silence of rock, lay true power: gold, silver, bronze. Sovereigns understood. Control of money was control of the world It wasn't simple commerce. It was power incarnate. Roman emperors built empires not only with swords, but with coins. They paid armies with money coined from their name. They collected tribute from conquered lands and transformed it into new money bearing their seal. Every coin was a declaration of power. Every transaction was an act of obedience to the authority that guaranteed it. Emperors collected gold as kings collect titles, not because it was beautiful, but because every gram was power no one else could use. Mines became contested lands. Battles were fought for control of gold and silver. Tributaries delivered their precious metals to the imperial capital. The equation was simple. The more gold a sovereign held, the more money he could mint. The more soldiers he could pay. The more lands he could conquer. The more tribute he could extract. The more gold he could accumulate. Money wasn't a tool of equity. It was a tool of conquest. And this principle never truly changed. Even today, countries with the largest gold reserves hold considerable geopolitical advantage. Because money is always a reflection of power, and power is always a reflection of who controls the money. Imagine yourself as a merchant in the Middle Ages. You've accumulated wealth in gold and silver, precious, heavy. You must cross the sea to reach new markets. The thought of transporting precious metals terrifies you. Pirates, bandits, accidents. What if there were another way? In 1609, in the Netherlands, an idea was born that transformed money forever, the Bank of Amsterdam. You brought your gold and silver to the bank. It weighed it, analyzed it, certified its purity. Then it gave you a piece of paper, a receipt. That receipt said, "You own this quantity of gold with us." Instead of carrying gold across the sea, you carried paper, light safe, and accepted everywhere in European commerce. It was no longer the physical money that had value. It was trust in the institution that held it. For the first time in human history, money became completely abstract. It was money because we all agreed that it was. This idea spread rapidly. Banks opened in every major European city. Governments established central banks. Sweden created the Riksbank in 1668. Britain created the Bank of England in 1694. Over time, governments linked the value of their money to a fixed quantity of gold. 1 pound equaled 1 ounce of gold. $1 equaled a fraction of an ounce. This was the gold standard. It would dominate world finance for nearly 300 years. It provided stability. It prevented excessive inflation. But it limited the freedom of governments to act during crises. Because for the first time, money wasn't merely a tool of government power. It was tied to something physical, concrete, limited. In 1944, while the world burned in the Second World War, 44 nations gathered in New Hampshire to ask a crucial question. How will we rebuild the global financial system when the war ends? The answer was Bretton Woods, an agreement that said, the world's money will be anchored to the American dollar, and the dollar will be anchored to gold. For the first time in history, a single national currency became the foundation of all world commerce. The dollar was how nations measured their wealth. The United States held enormous gold reserves. For nearly 30 years, this system worked. Economies recovered. Trade flourished. But in 1971, something changed. The United States had spent too much on distant wars. Its gold reserves were shrinking. It couldn't keep the promise. President Nixon made a simple announcement. The dollar is no longer tied to gold in a single day. The system that held the world together for 30 years collapsed. But something extraordinary was born from that collapse. Without the anchor of gold, money became completely abstract. It wasn't tied to anything physical. It was pure trust in the government that issued it. It was what our ancestors had imagined in the Bank of Amsterdam, brought to its logical conclusion. With the gold standard's end came globalization. Banks could transfer money across the world instantly. Commerce accelerated. Economies became intertwined. But a new problem was born. If money was just trust in government, what happened if the government failed? What if we could create money that depended on no government at all? In 2008, the financial world collapsed. Governments responded by printing enormous amounts of money to save the system. And a person, or a group, hiding behind the name Satoshi Nakamoto, looked at the chaos and wrote an 8-page document that changed everything. Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Bitcoin said, "We don't need banks. We don't need governments. We need only mathematics and collective consensus." For the first time, money could exist completely outside any institution's control. Only a network of computers agreeing on the value of every transaction. It was primitive barter through the most sophisticated technology ever created. The circle closed. From the double coincidence of wants in primitive marketplaces to a truly decentralized system through blockchain. But this isn't a conclusion. It's the beginning of a new chapter. Today, governments develop digital currencies. Banks experiment with blockchain. Financial markets become ever more digital. Money continues to evolve because it reflects the greatest discovery humanity ever made. That value is what we collectively decide it to be. From barter to coins, from gold to paper, from paper to the digital, every evolution solved a problem of its time. But each created new questions. What is money really? Not the metal, not the paper, not the pixels on the screen. Money is trust. It's our collective agreement on what has value and what doesn't. As long as humans trade, cooperate, and compete, money will evolve. Because money reflects how we see the world. And the world is always changing.